role of cities and towns in our communities?
Well, cities and towns are the foundation for most services. People get angry at Congress for what they are doing or what they're not doing, and cities and towns are where the rubber meets the road. And people don't think about that. They don't think about when they wake up in the morning, they turn on their water, they go to drive their kids to school, and they're stopping by the stoplights that are on, and the police department that is working to make sure that they are safe, and the fire department that is working to make sure that everybody's safe. They don't think about those things. So what's the role of cities and towns? It's to provide the essential services that everybody needs in order to live, work, and play.
What do you think the biggest challenge is that local governments face today?
Oh, that's really dependent on where you are. I would say the biggest challenge to local governments is the expectation of services from citizens who are disconnected from the realities of what it costs to provide those services. It doesn't matter where you are and what your financial situation is, there is an expectation that things are going to be world class. And we live in a society today where everything is at your fingertips, and it's typically going to be working well. But behind that, there is mountains of work to be done, and most people don't see that. And as we continually grow in a technological environment, the role of cities and towns and counties to provide those services in that same expectation is going to be monumental.
And last question, and I think you could probably really speak to this being a recruiter too. What role do retirement benefits play for local government employees?
This is one of the single largest negotiating items for new city managers or transitioning city managers. I think with how to phrase this? With state pension systems shifting kind of across the board, getting creative in how you approach not only retirement funding, but also medical retirement, which is going the way of the dodo. But there are innovative ways that I've seen coming out of government agencies to try and provide some level of medical retirement to supplement through various programs available. I think to find the top talent, agencies need to think out of the box and find ways to make the circle fit inside the square. And it's possible, and it's a highly negotiable item. City managers are willing to look at those creative alternatives. So, the 457 plans, 401As, additional funding into an HRA or HSAs. I mean, there's a lot of vehicles available to provide that retirement, the retirement that may or may not be available through your state anymore.
What is the role of cities and towns in our communities?
I like to say that we are the facilitators of services. Obviously, that's really the first thing that we provide. We provide services, but we also provide sort of the ability to make a place what it is and what it's known for. That we have the ability to give a brand to a community and to really continue to promote that, as well as then provide ways for us to grow. I think there's so much that is about growth and how you develop and move forward, and I think that's really where a city's role is.
And what is the biggest challenge local governments face today?
I think there's a definite challenge with recruitment for key positions at this point. You know, we're seeing a generational shift where I've got I think 4 or 5 retirements coming up in key positions in the next few years. And how do we make sure that we have the talent internally to fill those positions? Or if we don't have the talent internally, what is our plan for being able to fill those key roles once the owners of those roles do depart our organization?
What role do retirement benefits play for local government employees?
Retirement benefits is one of the things that I think local government employees sort of pride ourselves on a little bit more than maybe private sector employees, because we take less compensation typically to make sure that we have a better retirement on the back end, whether it's through a pension system or otherwise. And so I think the ability to be able to retire at an early age not only makes it easier for the pipeline of younger talent to keep coming into an organization, but it gives someone the ability to pursue a second career as well.
What is the role of cities and towns in our communities?
Previously, I think historically, the role has been to provide services, which may sound pretty basic, but that's really, I think, what traditional local government and cities were. Today, there are so many social issues plaguing our communities, pay and gender equity, legalizing marijuana, homelessness, affordable housing. Those social equity issues are plaguing communities, and so the role of cities and towns is becoming more pronounced every day, and that we're being leaders in leading the way to finding solutions to a lot of these issues. That's what local government is today, cities, towns. That's what the role is today, is to be to find resolve for these issues in an inclusive way, because our communities are so diverse and they're changing. That's what cities and towns and its role is today.
No, so you mentioned inclusion already, but is there, one of their questions is, what is the biggest challenge local governments face today?
I think that local governments face a gap, and that gap is communication. How we communicate with the changing face of our communities. They're more diverse, they're younger, we're getting older also. So the forms in which we communicate today are so vast and ever changing. How do we continue to communicate and engage our citizens in the process? I think that's the biggest challenge that we have, is how do we communicate and bridging that gap.
Right, I think you're right, that's for sure. Last question from them is, what role do retirement benefits play for local government employees?
For me, it plays a huge role, and I'm sure that it does for every other employee. I think that having a trusted source like Icma Rc, who's been providing retirement benefits for such a long time, at least a year after I was born, I think that gives you the relief and the safety, knowing that we can do the business of the people while someone's looking out for us and someone's got our back, and making sure that we can retire and live comfortably with our families.
What is the role of cities and towns in our communities?
I think the cities and towns are the voices of the people, that local government is such an important part of how our country works, because you have the federal government, then you have all your state government, but it's really until you get to the local government where change can really happen that actually impacts what a community wants and reflects an individual community's goals. For example, in Malibu, about a year and a half ago, we banned plastic straws. We're obviously a beach community. We have 21 miles of coast, and so protecting our oceans is very important to us. And so we were one of the first cities in California to actually ban plastic straws, which was important to our community for reasons that are very dear to us. And then now the state of California has actually banned them as well. But it's us taking that step to do what we believe is right for us.
That's so fantastic. You were a leader in that movement.
Yeah.
Wonderful. What do you think is one of the biggest challenges local governments face today?
I think there's so many things that local government wants to do, and obviously there's a limit on the amount of funding that you can have to accomplish those things. So I think that there's not a community that I know of that wouldn't want to do more and provide more for their citizens, whether it's park facilities or community facilities or cultural experiences or safer roads or more police. I think all of us want that, and really the thing that stands in the way is the funding.
And what role do retirement benefits play for local government employees?
I think it's an important thing. I think we work very, very hard, and I think communities expect their government employees to work hard. We are public servants, and we are serving our communities, for years on end. And so knowing that you have a pension at the end of that, I think is a bonus. I like to jokingly say on my worst days, it's kind of the hope that keeps me going, but I don't know if that's the right answer. So. You don't need to put that on the film, but that's my true feeling.
I think the role of the cities and towns in our communities are to make sure that within our borders we have good infrastructure and we have safe cities. And also I think there's a role into defining the culture. The culture may already be there, but to help define it and help talk about it. And help us grow towards our values as a community is really what I think the main role is for the cities.
So what's the biggest challenge that local governments face today?
The biggest challenge is recruitment and retention. It is the biggest challenge. We can no longer just go to the cities and the local governments around us to find our candidates. We have to go out into the private sector. And especially now in Alabama, where there are so few professionally managed cities, the recruitment pool is even more limited. But people from the public sector, or people from the private sector don't necessarily, sometimes it's a reputation that the private sector has. Sometimes it's benefits. It used to be that in government and in nonprofit, the salaries were lower, but the benefits were always better. And that's just not the case anymore. So we have to really be, again, intentional about looking at the benefits, understanding where our competition is. Because it's not just at our neighboring two cities, it's all over. And then deciding how we want to be competitive.
Well, actually, that ties into the last question for them, which is what role does retirement benefits play in local government?
Retirement benefits play a huge role in local government. And I want to give you an example of that. I want to say, especially when you're going to hire senior level people, because I've got a 25 and a 23-year-old, and when they take the jobs they took that they're in now, they're not necessarily thinking about retirement benefits. But we just tried to hire a department head, a Department of Public Works and Development Services. We hired him from the private sector. He needed to have a certain level of benefits in order to be able to take that job. It was going to be a job cut. I also tried to hire a department head recently from another local government, and their retiree health care benefits were so much better than ours that he said to me, even if I wanted to come, I couldn't come. You know, I'm within that 8-year window of retirement, so why would I do that? That would be a foolish move for me. So while it may not necessarily affect our entry-level employees, it certainly is impacting our ability to hire the people that we want to hire within the organization or outside the organization, and then within the organization to be able to keep them.
As professionals, we are there to execute what, like our town is representative town meeting, so they vote on everything that we do. You know, they decide, and we're there to provide neutral information so that they can make informed decisions about where they want the town to go. I think sometimes we should give our opinions because of experience that we have with other decisions, but ultimately our job is to execute what the town votes on and what they are looking to do and where they want to go.
Great. What's the biggest challenge that local governments face today?
I think unfortunately our political climate, again, even though we're not supposed to be political, I think there's a mistrust in government in general, and that filters down no matter how much we try to be transparent and we try to make sure we have all the data back up and all the research back up for any recommendations that we make. It's that unrest and that distrust, I think, unfortunately, is just here to stay for a while. So that's difficult to work in an environment that's the underlying feeling of residents or elected officials and that sort of thing.
And finally, what role do retirement benefits play for local government employees?
I think there's a huge role of retirement benefits. I mean, it's with pensions and with just inflation and everything, it's hard to think what the future holds, what you're going to need in order to live after you retire. I think that benefits can vary from town or city, but I think it's probably one of the stable benefits that we have in our town, at least, that attracts people to the profession. If you're thinking about the future, depending maybe on where you are in your career, but I think to have the opportunity to look at what our benefits actually look like, I think that it's a hard question depending on where you're at in your career. They try to, I think when you're hired, it's try to impress it upon you to start saving for your retirement, but you may not necessarily think that's very important. But as we all know, it's hard to start saving mid-career, later career, and expect to have the same amount when you retire. So I think that having, I know that that's part of the pay is not, for some cities and towns, for some people, is not that great, but the benefits that offset the pay is what attracts people, some people, to work in local government, because you don't have the thought that the pension's going to be blown away by, you know, a mismatch of funds or investors or that sort of thing. It just, I think, I don't really know how to answer that. I'm not in the finance world. It's hard for me to answer that. But I mean, for me, the benefits, I think, are phenomenal. I think you can't go wrong in the public sector with the retirement benefits. We're lucky to have them, I think.
The institutions, and that includes cities and counties, the institutions that have surrounded us all of this time. So if you think about, you know, religion, society, the media, big institutions that have worked a certain way for the last, I'm just making this up, generation, 25 years, they don't serve us anymore. The structures and the way that they are organized don't serve us as people or communities anymore. And so I feel like the answer to that question is to be determined. I think it's shifting, and I've been thinking a lot about that, because when I'm in my own city, I wonder, how can I make what my city is doing relevant for the 54,000 people who live in my city? And I have a hard time doing that because I'm part of an institution that isn't really relevant to them anymore. They don't really want what we do, and they don't really want to know what we do unless we are, you know, unless we're dragging them to come have a conversation with us. So sorry, wasn't really a good answer, but that's.
Actually, it's very interesting.
I'm not sure cities and counties have a role in our communities anymore unless they can keep their relevance as an institution.
That's an important thing to consider, actually. Really. What do you think the biggest challenge local governments face today?
I think I just said it. I think it's relevance. I think being relevant in a person's life. And I'll just say one other thing. The thing that got me into local government, another thing is that I also have a background in economics. And when you learn about a public good, which is something that is indivisible by all of us in society, it's not something that I can divide out the cost to you and you and you. A public good is something that has to be shared among everybody, and it's indivisible among everybody. And a government provides the things, the public goods, that the market will not or cannot provide. And so I think one of the biggest challenges facing local government today is relevance, but as it relates to providing those public goods and helping people understand why a road or a school or a library, a public library, is so crucial. And anyway, that was a really disjointed answer. Anyway.
Interesting perspective. I really appreciate it. And then finally, what role do retirement benefits play for local government?
Retirement benefits, let's see. I think that, a personal note, I have a partner who, he retired from law enforcement when he was 55. And he now has this, he's got like 2 part-time jobs, and he's looking ahead and he's wondering, so, you know, he's working, but he doesn't have benefits. And he's gonna be working until he retires again. And so retirement benefits, especially as it relates to medical, like health insurance, is, you know, in our society right now, there's a gap. And if anybody decides to change careers or they decide to change gears in their lives, then the retirement benefits that come with whether you're moving from one career to the next or you don't want to work anymore, the retirement benefits are, I'm going to just start by saying they're important, they're expensive, and they're not available to everybody. And so, like, from an accessibility standpoint, I think local government employees are trying to figure out how to maintain them for the long term.
the role of cities and towns in our communities?
Well, dating back to thousands of years ago, cities have always served as the cultural and arts center, a place to be a public forum for all of the residents. I think what you're seeing now with a lot of the digital solutions we're finding in cities is that we're starting to come back to a lot of that, where we're talking about civic discourse being used in a digital format, opening up dialogue for people that used to never be a part of the discussion. So I believe the most important thing that cities can be is to be inclusive of everybody in a community, find out what the issues are, and look for effective and efficient ways of getting the job done, raising quality of life through that type of dialogue. Yeah.
Very good. How about the biggest challenge facing local government today?
Biggest challenge. I believe that one of the biggest issues that governments have, local, state, federal, but definitely in the local government world, is understanding that we've built out an infrastructure that is very large, it's very expensive to upkeep. Cities such as the Nashvilles, the Charlottes, the Houstons and Dallases of the world have started to learn that density is not a bad thing. It's okay if you build it deliberately and intelligently. Density is a good thing, and being able to harness density into better retail and commercial opportunities for those cities. We as a society have really been happy with a suburban sprawl that costs a lot of money to maintain, and that's partially why you see a lot of the engineering societies grading the United States relatively low nowadays, because we have such a large road, water, sewer infrastructures. And so I think the challenge of this century of local governments is bringing people back to human-scaled infrastructure and saying, can you walk to places? Where's your local shopping center? Is it 5 miles away or is it 5 blocks away? And trying to have an economy reinforcing that human-scaled infrastructure is going to be a challenge of this century.
What role do retirement benefits play for local government employees?
Sure. Well, you know, as one of the biggest perks of being in local government is the idea that at some point in time there's a secure financial retirement waiting at the end of that hard work in public service. It's very important in recruiting and retention of staff. Of course, it's very hard to explain to a 20 or a 21-year-old, you know, hey, you know what, if you work for 30 to 35 years, you're gonna have this great retirement. But what I do hope we can do, especially with our younger employees, is show them that we are investing in them. And I think we need to rebrand how we are investing in them and make sure they understand how much funding through health benefits, retirement benefits, supplemental benefits, and starting putting cash figures to what we're investing in them individually. But I think with that rebranding, a lot of more people will be very pleased and very happy to know that their local government, their employer, is investing as much in them as they are, and having resources like Icma Rc is a very important part of that portfolio. It's not just about getting your pension, it's about making sure that you're putting away a little bit of money on the side as well in a separate fund to firmly secure your retirement future. Great recruiting tool, retention tool, and probably one of the most important things that local governments can use to retain talent.
They're gonna love that. Yeah, that's very good.
Yeah.
That's how the other questions were for podcast, but it's too noisy in here.
So, no, I understand. Well, thank you so much. I hope it wasn't too wordy. I was trying not to.
You did great. That was really good.
Please do. Love to. I mean, we're a small agriculture.